This is Stories on Stage Sacramento, so hopefully you're in the right place. You're not looking for the ballet. I am Jessica Laskey. I'm the Executive Director of Stories on Stage Sacramento. We are very, very glad to have you for Friday the 13th Horror Night. This is about as spooky as we get, is the purple moody lighting. So we're very glad to have you here. And I just have a couple thingies to tell you before we start our program. But mostly, you're going to be hearing two pieces this evening. One is a short story, Unfathomable, by P. Joshua Laskey, who also happens to be the Artistic Director of Stories on Stage Sacramento. You'll see him later. And then we're going to have an excerpt from Jonathan Mumm's book, Stop It, You're Scaring Me, and that will be in the second act. Just so you kind of get an idea of the flow of everything, we'll have the first piece read, then we'll have our raffle, and I will show you the goodies that you might get to win. So everybody who came in should have gotten a yellow raffle ticket, so we will raffle 4 items off right before intermission. There will be a 15-minute intermission, then the second story, the excerpt from Jonathan Mumm's book, will be read, and then we're going to do something we've not done before at Stories on Stage, which is an Inside the Actor's Studio style 20 questions with Jonathan Mumm, and it's going to be kind of fun because it's those sort of offbeat questions that James Lipton used to get away with asking. So we're very excited to have that. Some basic things, the restrooms, hopefully you found them already if you needed to, but they're just right in the back on either side. The exits, you can see the illuminated exit signs, so all of these doors go out to the parking lot in case there is a spooky emergency, or back the way you came, back out those double doors. Please take a moment to turn off your cell phones, either silence, all the way off, do not disturb, airplane, whatever, just make sure, please, that they don't ring. And I think without further ado, I would like to welcome up, oh no, yes, there is one more thing. There's a program, but it's digital, so that we don't waste a bunch of paper. So back on the ticket table, there are those little QR codes. There's one on each side, and you can scan that, and you can see the program, which has obviously the rundown of what's happening, but also the bios and more information about the authors and the actors. So now, without further ado, I would like to welcome our actor, Kelley Odgen, reading P. Joshua Laskey's Unfathomable.
The night we wrecked, I held the baby in my arms, bobbing in the inky sea until a wave came by and kissed her face, stealing her away forever. My husband didn't know of our loss until we were safely aboard a rescue vessel sent out to attend to our distress call. He stood in his life jacket, dripping wet in the moonlight, and stared at me uncomprehendingly. Holding our eldest daughter by the hand to his left and our middle daughter by the hand to his right, he looked almost saint-like, guiding the children out of the flood and into the safety of drier foreign lands. He didn't speak, and neither did I, standing there, empty-handed as I was. "Hello," a woman old enough to be my mother says, raising her hand in the air in greeting as she enters the small office where I sit alone. "Hello," I manage, smiling with only my thin, chapped lips. "Is it that you would prefer to speak French?" she says in words I understand much better, though I don't know why at first. "But, yes," I answer, feeling the smile grow to my cheeks, but not quite reach my eyes. "Your husband says that there were 3 daughters with you on the boat, 5 in total. Is that not so?" How know you the French?" I stare at her, but try not to be impolite. "Volunteer work in francophone countries," she says, after a moment's thoughtful hesitation. "Ah," I say. I smile with my eyes now, too. "Benevolescence?" Is it that's the word? Yes, yes, yes. Benevolescence, you are a benevolent person. Well, voila, she smiles back at me. And I realize I'm using my whole face this time. Is it that you volunteer here too? I try my best to speak her language, or at least use her words for things, but my brain's gone to mush overnight. No, this is my work. Is it that you are police? No, she laughs. I'm here to help you and your family recover from the accident. I look down at her desk and I see the backs of picture frames set up on the corner of it opposite her computer. I wonder what the photographs are of, or whom they're of. My own family, she says, picking up one of the frames and handing it to me across the desk. 2 young boys stand grinning with a man behind them, his hands resting gently on their shoulders. My sons are grown now, living far away off the island. Is it that you lack? Do you miss them? I stammer, but manage. The children are supposed to go away from us, but yes, they me lack. I stare at the photo, and she doesn't interrupt. Looking up, I ask, then where are you? I hold the frame up and flick my nose at the photo. Me? I took it, she smiles. On vacation to one of the other islands, frankly, where the French speaks itself. Guadeloupe or Martinique? I set the frame back on her desk. We there were headed. I swallow hard, remembering why I am sitting in a tiny office without air conditioning. On an Anglophone island we only meant to visit to reprovision ourselves, and not on the deck of our small but functional yacht, watching my husband pilot us through the turquoise waters of our wildest dreams. I feel the tears on my cheeks. And the older woman, she hands me a box of tissues, but I only yank a single one out, and I dab at my eyes. I will not be ashamed for having held my baby for as long as I could. Maureen, I say with as much volume as I can muster. Sorry. Maureen. The baby was called Maureen. She did survive, not the wreck. The government finds us shelter in a better hotel than we could have ever afforded. When the older woman comes to take the children, they are delighted to play with a stranger in a tiny park we can see from our window. She calls them by name, as if she's making a point to single them out as individual people. Celeste and Therese. She caresses their names with her lips and tongue. And I'm happy for a moment that they might forget the night we've had, sweating through the sheets, pretending to sleep, or fighting off nightmares. Once we're alone, for the first time since setting off on our circumnavigation of the globe, my husband hisses, "How could you lose her?" It was your idea to buy a boat and sail around the world with 3 small children, I say, staring out the window at the girls on the swing set giggling and screaming with unfettered pleasure. I had 2 toddlers in my arms, and both of them, they're still alive. She's playing with them the way your mother does, back home. You wanted to have an adventure too, he says. You wanted to have a story to tell for the rest of our lives. I turn at the sound of springs giving way beneath his limited bulk. He turns his face away so I can't see the tears in his eyes. I turn back to the window. And now we have one. I hear him sobbing quietly, trying not to be heard. I watch the children spinning on the merry-go-round and wonder if they'll vomit from making themselves dizzy. I wanted to do this before the girls got old enough to start leaving us, I say softly, before we had anything to lose. Good day. Our older woman greets me as she enters the small room where I sit alone on a sturdy leather sofa. Good day, I manage, smiling with only my dry, tired eyes. I would prefer to speak English today, I say, in a voice not quite my own, but familiar enough to suffice. Okay, she says, sitting in an armchair opposite me. Any particular reason? My emotions, it's easier to speak logic, not in French. I am here to help in whatever way you need, she says, smiling with downturned lips. I need to return to the beach. She gives me a confused expression. Wherever we could be closest to where the boat sank, I say. Ah, she breathes, nodding gently. I can make sure that happens. Thank you. Do you just want to go there, she asks, or do you need anything else? Just to go, I say. And your family? If they wish to join me, it is okay, but not necessary. The nightmares have become unbearable. The girls sleep with their father in one bed so that I don't thrash him in the night or them. They look terrible in the morning, like I've kept the 3 of them up all night. He shields them from me, hustles them off to breakfast, plays with them in the park, chatting with the older woman or her daughter, who sometimes comes to relieve her mother of the burden of us. The first afternoon she came, the younger woman, she cooed at our accents, especially my husband's. He flirted with her terribly. The baby is in my arms. The water's choppy, and she's gone. I dunk my head beneath the waves to watch her sink. I swim after her, but each time I get my fingertips against her skin, the pain in my lungs forces me to rocket back to the surface. She's asleep the whole time. Peaceful, ignorant, serene. I wake up wet, drenched, choking for air. The girls pretend to be asleep in the crooks of their father's arms. He stares up at the ceiling, awake, watchful, but not turning his head to look at me. And I wonder what he's thinking about. But then, without warning, I am descending again into the depths. She's floating downward more than sinking. Then she vanishes in the shadows, and I propel myself upwards kicking and trying not to gasp too soon. I wake up alone in the room. I'm not sure I've actually regained consciousness as the bed next to mine is empty. Where could he have taken them? It's the middle of the night and we don't know this place. And I realize I am not breathing and gasp. I'm awake. I know it. That this isn't the hotel room. This isn't anywhere I recognize. I'm alone in a small bedroom. I shriek. The older woman rushes in, flicks on the light. Where am I? I cry out as she moves to my bedside. Staying at mine, she says soothingly, taking my hand in hers, stroking it. Remember? I try to muster enough English to rebuke her, but her French overwhelms me. No, I whimper, this is your place? You were afraid you were keeping your family from sleeping properly, she says. So you let me stay with you? My daughter's old room. She doesn't need it anymore. She smiles and pats my hand. I think back to all the picture frames on her desk to the tiny office, and I realize I only saw a single one of her photos. Why is it that she isn't in the photo of your family on vacation? Wasn't born yet, still in my belly. So I stammer, trying to comprehend. She was there, but not there. I guess you could say that. I sit up a little, propped against the pillow. Want me to stay with you for a while? The woman asks. No. I'll be fine. It's not grave. She waits a moment, searching my face, before getting up from the side of the bed and crossing the room. In the doorway, she turns, nods with care in her eyes, and turns out the lights. And in the darkness, I stare into nothing. Marine's little body in the arms of an octopus. It's feeding on her flesh. Marine's little bones in the guts of a shark. I see her skeleton clearly, but it's not held together right. The pile of bones is confused, it's jumbled. The shark's lurid eyes turn to stare at me, and I see in its watery reflection the moment it snatched her in its jaws and cut through her infant flesh, ripping, tearing, feasting on my helpless daughter. Marine's little fingers in the mouths of colorful fish. She's caught in the coral. She's stuck to the reef, and they're nibbling at her toes. Her delicate curls, her eyelids. She looks like she's sleeping, but they are boring into her flesh, and they're tugging at her innards, and they're suckling on her heart. Still and leaking blood, unfurling crimson tendrils into the salty water's careless embrace. Oh, Marine's little legs in the pinchers of a crab. It's plucking off chunks of her flesh, and shrimp are clawing at her belly. A lobster crawls over her face, testing the plumpness of her cheeks. And there's an eel lying in wait. Marine's little hand in the beak of a turtle, gliding by with blood and bone trailing behind it. The raggedy flesh of her wrist waving in the current. Marine's little foot, impaled on the spike of a stingray's tail. Marine's little eyes, frozen, staring into nothing. Hello, the woman's daughter says, raising her hand in the air in greeting as she joins us on the beach. Hello, I manage, smiling with only my thin, chapped lips. When she calls out to the children by name, as if she's making a point to single them out as individual people, they run into her arms, Celeste and Therese. She butchers their names with her raspy throat and lazy tongue, and I'm happy for a moment when my husband cringes at the indelicate sound she makes. She's barely older than a child herself. Perhaps I'd have liked her had the circumstances been different. If she had traded places with her mother the first day after the wreck. If she'd been like a baby sister to me from the start, as her own mother had been like a mother of sorts. If she hadn't exoticized my life. I watched the girls play in the sand with her for a while. I watched the sea pretending to be calm, inviting, innocuous. I watched my husband watch the young woman playing with his daughters. I watched the older woman arrive late with a picnic. As everyone eats and laughs, I stand alone, apart, at the edge of the sea. I let the waves lap my naked toes. I let the ocean taste me. At no particular moment, I start walking towards my missing baby. When I'm shin deep in the foamy water, I feel a tug at my arm. Mama, where are you going? Celeste, my elder, asks. To look for your sister, I say, shaking her off, but smiling. Do you know where she is? She asks hopefully. I think so. We come too, a smaller voice demands, and I realize Therese is yanking the fingers of my opposite hand. No, I say. You stay and play in the sand. Maybe we can help, Celeste suggests, grasping me by the wrist with a fierceness I know won't be easy to dismiss. I shake my head. 6 eyes are better than 2, she says, furrowing her brow as if willing me to capitulate. She frowns when I say nothing in response, and then lays her head against my hip. I stare out to sea, and Therese kisses my fingertips. The ebb and flow of the water pulls me, pushes me, surrounds me. I feel the sun hot on my skin. I see Marine bobbing on the waves, but only for an instant. And with a daughter clinging to each hand, I continue to walk towards the abyss. I don't hear anything from the beach as we walk. My girls now floating beside me, crawling up my arms until I'm carrying them both like an overtaxed St. Christopher. When I'm up to my neck in the watery embrace of the sea, I watch the horizon disappear before the waves until one finally comes by to kiss my face, stealing us away forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelley. That was wonderful. Heartbreaking, but wonderful. So now it's time for the raffle. We have 4 different items that you can win. And again, it's the little yellow ticket. And actually, can we bring up the house light so that people can read? Because I can barely read as it is, so that would be that would be helpful. There we go. And thank you. Yeah, there we go. And so actually, the writer of the piece that you just heard, Joshua, is going to be coming up to do the raffling sort of retrieval part of this. So to tell you what we have, first of all, we have our Stories on Stage. I'm gonna bag everything up. There we go. Our Stories on Stage anthology from 2020, A Year Like No Other, and it contains lots and lots of writers actually that you've probably seen here and heard before. It contains a story by Joshua and many of our past authors. So this is also for sale in the back, so if you don't win it, you can still buy it. We also have another anthology that is actually YA, and it also contains a story by Joshua. We actually helped publish this. But it's What Doesn't Kill You. It's 24 stories that are YA, but I would say older YA, so like, not like 10, like 13. And then we have the book that you're about to hear an excerpt from, Jonathan Mumm's Stop It, You're Scaring Me. So this is the book that you're gonna hear. And then, because also if you haven't read about Jonathan's background, you really should make sure you do the little QR code of the program, because he's done many things and has lived many lives, but one of the things is he's a filmmaker. And so 2 of his horror films, the Chupacabra series, are out on, this is Blu-ray? Yes, Blu-ray. And these are also for sale in the back, the book and the Blu-rays, but we'll also be giving one away right now. So just so you know what you're about to win. You'll also get it in a nifty little tote bag. So I'm gonna just, do you want this to be secret or just? Okay. Yeah. So I'm gonna stuff them so I don't know where they are. Like opening presents? Okay, here we go. Should have done this earlier. Okay. Let's see how the magic is made. There we go. Okay. Okay. So first one. Yeah, just pick those. Oh. All right. First number is upside down. 615806. Heard a woo. Oh yes! Yay! Woo! Okay. Shuffling forward. Rocking. I'm shuffling. Okay. Shuffling. I have no idea. There you go. There you go. Oh, thank you. All right. Next one is 615773. Do I hear a woo? Yay! Thank you. Yeah. Sure. Thank you. Okay, 2 more to go. Okay. 615782. Oh, yay! Thank you. There you go. Sure. Thank you. All right, last one. Good mix. Okay. We have 615771. Yay! All right. Thank you. All right. So now we'll have a 15-minute. Yes, I trust you.
No one else jumped up. There were 2 or 3 people jumped up at the same time.
There you go. You're a good actor. It's good. We will now have a 15-minute intermission, and then we will come back for more stories and 20 questions. Hello again. I hope you all got cookies. There are so many cookies back there. Please, they are free, so please make sure you get some cookies before you leave. We also still, like I mentioned before, after the show, we'll still have an opportunity for you to buy things from Jonathan, whose piece you're about to hear. We also have Stories on Stage merch, so make sure you stick around and sort of poke around and look at stuff at the end. But now, it is my great pleasure to turn this over to our second piece of the evening, an excerpt from Jonathan Mumm's book, Stop It, You're Scaring Me, read by Analise Langford-Clark.
Stop It, You're Scaring Me by Jonathan Mumm. This selection comes from chapter 18. The odd feeling began welling up inside of her, that feeling she didn't like, The one that made it hard to breathe. It's all right. Count to 10. But something was wrong. She could feel the moisture on the palms of her hands. It was a sound, wasn't it? And she could barely hear it. Whispering. She sat up top, listening. She was certain it was there right beyond the door, but she couldn't catch the words. Slowly and carefully, so as not to make any noise, she pushed the covers away from her and slid to the side of the bed. One foot on the floor, then the other. She was standing, then walking, her bare feet stepping softly across the room. At the door she stood stock still. The whispering was there, but she still couldn't make out what was being said. Her hand moved to the doorknob. Then she remembered. Will be locked, she thought, from the outside. But to her surprise, it turned easily at her touch, and the door creaked open. There was no one in the hallway. And yet, just beyond, the whispering continued. Only now it was further away, seemingly down the stairs. Trying to step as lightly as she could, she went after it. The house was cold, and she shivered as she reached the top step and looked down. A light flickered below, and she wondered if someone had lit a fire. Should she call out and see if anyone was there? And then a tingling went through her. One of the words she had caught and understood. Kathleen. Her hand was on the rail, and slowly and carefully she descended. She bent her head to try to see below as she went, trying to catch a glimpse of whoever it was who might be talking about her. But the room seemed empty. Kathleen. On she went and on, just a few more steps, and she was standing at the bottom level. She crept around the corner to the living room and saw that yes, a fire was crackling in the hearth. But again, no one was there. She stopped to listen. Kathleen. It was coming from the kitchen. It's the only way. The voice was heavy and deep. A man's voice. Lives are at stake. She didn't recognize it. The new security guard Dr. Holt had hired, perhaps? But who was he talking to? And then there was another sound. A second voice, soft and meek, full of fear and apprehension. But it wasn't words she heard. It was a sad and terrible sigh. A moan that came from somewhere deep inside, slowly building in fear and horror. Kathleen rounded the corner and stopped dead in her tracks. A woman, pale and deathly, stood staring at her. But no, it was only a reflection in the window of the china cabinet. The face of a woman twisted in agony and pain. Kathleen's own face went white, her lips suddenly numb. How could it be? How could it be? For she was the reflection in the glass. He's behind you. Kathleen whirled, but no, the feeling was wrong. There was no one behind her. A log broke apart in the living room fireplace. The whispering is in the walls. She went to the wall and she pressed her ear against the wallpaper, but no, it wasn't in the walls. It's from below. Kathleen's eyes dart around the room, and then she found herself staring at the door to the basement. Could that be it? Could someone be down there? 3 steps and she was at the door, her ear to the wood. Something vibrated, hummed. She twisted the knob and the door creaked open in front of her. Wooden stairs and a wooden railing disappeared into the dense darkness below. Her hand found the light switch, but she hesitated to turn it on. Wouldn't that warn whoever was down there that she was on to them? But that's what you want, isn't it? She flipped the switch, expecting the basement to be suddenly flooded with light. Nothing happened. The light is out. She stood frozen at the top of the stairs, her ears straining for the slightest sound, her eyes trying to pierce the gloom. They saw you open the door. They know you're here. But wait a second. There it was. The whispering, definitely coming from below. She was sure of it. But if they were down there, that would mean that they were in the dark. How could they see in the dark? The voice in her head figured it out. They're dead. The tingling feeling she didn't like went up her spine. But she shook her head. It was a fantasy. It was a hallucination. The dead weren't down in the basement having a conversation. Then get a flashlight and find out. But Kathleen didn't like that idea either. Still, it would be proof, wouldn't it? She backed up, closing the door, trying not to make a sound, then went into the pantry looking for a flashlight. A silverware drawer, a drawer full of cloth napkins, a drawer with a tourist book for Tahoe were there, an odds and ends drawer full of nails and screws, a hammer, a screwdriver, and a flashlight. She pulled it from the drawer and looked into the lens, switched it on. The light flashed in her eyes and she quickly pulled away, blinking furiously at 100 spots that appeared before her. She slid the door closed and stood for a moment thinking. The clock ticked in the living room. Deliberately, she made her way back to the basement door and pulled it open. She aimed the flashlight into the darkness and clicked it on, but it didn't go on. She hit it against her palm and it flashed on, then off. She hit it again and the beam came to life. She pointed it below onto the stairs and then started to descend slowly, carefully, silently. The dank, musty smell she had noticed once or twice in her room was unmistakable here. She could imagine the walls dripping with wet and mold. Down she went and down, careful to keep the light just in front of her. And then suddenly, without warning, the flashlight went out. It's all right, just hit it against your palm again. She tried, nothing. She did it again, still nothing. Come on, she thought, you were working fine, come on. And then above, the door slammed shut. She gasped loud, the darkness gobbling her up, pressing against her. Panicked, she hit the flashlight against her hand again, but the gloom had snaked around her, squeezing the air out of her and would not let her go. Kathleen tried to run back up the stairs, but she tripped, almost falling, catching herself on the railing, the flashlight slipping from her grasp and crashing down one step, then another on its long way to the bottom. She reached her hand out for it, uselessly. And there, in the darkness in front of her, what was that? What ill-defined shape seemed to be forming before her eyes? It's impossible, she thought. I can't see in the dark like this. It's just images in my head. But something was there. An outline faintly glowing before her. It was a mist, a floating fog in the form of a man. Yes, the man she had seen behind her that night in the mirror, the man with the soulful eyes, the pained expression, his ethereal arms reaching out to her. A low, horrible groan just at the edge of her hearing drifted for a moment in the air. She turned and ran, totally blind, her bare feet thumping up the stairs. Up and up she went, horrified that she might fall, but even more horrified that the thing behind her would catch her. And then instinct let her feel the nearness of the door, her hand darting out, trying desperately to find the knob. No, where was it? Where the hell? There. She clutched it in her fingers and turned it. But it wouldn't turn. It wouldn't budge. It can't be locked, she thought. It can't be locked. She felt the thing behind her. She heaved her body up against the door and it swung open. She scrambled up the top steps and ran through the morning room, the living room, down the hall and up the stairs she went. For one heart-stopping moment, she slipped on the stairs and fell on one knee, but was back up in an instant. She ran instinctively to the master bedroom, but the door was locked. She turned and looked back down the hallway. The long shadows quivered along the wall. The thing had gained substance and weight. She could hear his steps, heavy and deliberate, making their way up the steps. What could she do? Where could she go? She ran into the bedroom where she had been sleeping, slamming the door after her, and then, since there was no way to lock it from the inside, looked desperately for something to prop up against it to keep it shut. The footsteps had reached the top of the stairs. She could hear them coming steadily down the hallway, nearer and nearer. Her breath was escaping in shallow gasps as she reached for a chair in front of a small makeup table and frantically slid it across the floor, but the legs hit an uneven section of the flooring and it jerked to a stop, sending her sprawling onto the rug. The doorknob turned. The door swung open. She screamed. Miss Evans, are you all right? Do you need some help?" It was a voice she didn't recognize. A man she had never seen before suddenly appeared in the opening of the door. He was dressed in the uniform of a security guard. His eyes opened wide as he saw her on the floor, and he moved quickly to help her to her feet. "Sorry to just barge in on you, miss." The accent sounded English, but I thought maybe you were in trouble. I heard you fall. You're all right then? "Who are you?" she asked breathlessly. "What are you doing here?" "My name's Abbott, Glenn Abbott. Dr. Holt hired me to keep a watch outside your door. Just here to make sure somebody's around if you need anything or to see that nobody bothers you." Kathleen let him help her to the bed. She realized she was trembling. Dr. Holt is afraid of something, she thought. And so are you. "That's fine, Mr. Abbott," Kathleen said, her teeth on edge. "But I need to know who else is here right now besides you and me. There's a man down below in the basement." "In the basement? I don't think anyone is in the basement, or the whole place for that matter, except for you and me, of course, but I'll look. Hang on a moment, then." He turned to go. She grabbed his arm. "You have a gun?" He stared at her, and a funny look came into his eyes. "Now, I'm sure there's no need for guns, miss," he said. He keeps saying miss. Who says miss anymore? Well, he's English, isn't he? Aren't the English old-fashioned? Isn't that a sign of respect? Respect? Or sarcasm? Gently, he took her hand off his arm. "I'll be all right," he said. He left and she climbed off the bed, going to the door and standing there listening. His footsteps crossed the hall and then began to descend the stairs. She turned out the light in the bedroom and stood in the dark. He was at the bottom now. She could hear him in the living room, the morning room. "Hello then, anybody here?" His voice was muffled, floating almost eerily through the empty house. Cabinets opened and closed, pantries, closets, the basement door creaked open. "Hello?" There had to be someone there, hadn't there? Something caught her eye from across the room, out the window. Slowly she crossed the room, till she stood there at the glass, looking out into the night. It was dark, with swirling black clouds, punctuated here and there by shafts of moonlight reaching through the sparkle of the dark water to the lake. What was that? Out there, on the island, a light. Yes! There it was, on, then off again, then on. Was someone signaling? Was the light being carried by someone, disappearing perhaps as they moved behind the trees, hidden momentarily from view? The door opened, and she turned to see Abbott framed in silhouette. No one's here, Miss Evans, I'm sure of it. You okay now? But you saw it, didn't you? Didn't you see it? It was hard to remember. I'm fine, she said. I'm going to bed. Okay, good night then. I'll be right here if you need anything. Yes, thank you, she said. And the door closed, leaving her once again in darkness. She turned back to the window. The light on the island was gone.
So at this point, we're doing our new thing that we're going to try and do. We're going to do a Q&A inside the actor studio style. For those of you who remember, James Lipton at the very end would ask sort of a series of interesting, penetrating, sometimes silly questions. And so we're going to do that with Jonathan Mumm, the author who wrote the piece that you just heard. So I'd like to introduce, have him come up, as well as Joshua, so that because Joshua's going to be doing our James Lipton, asking our questions. So if we can invite them up. Yes. And give them a round of applause.
Got it?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is Inside the Writer's Studio, a game of 20 questions inspired by the Bernal Pivot inspired end of James Lipton's Inside the Actor's Studio. It's a very long time. But you gotta give credit where credit is due. There are 4 simple rules.
Okay,
Speak before you think.
that's easy for me.
Brevity is the soul of wit. There are no wrong answers, and enjoy yourself. Do you have any questions?
No,
All right, good. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. When, where, and or how did you first fall in love with writing?
I think it was the Hardy Boys. I think when I was a kid and I read those books and I had to write my own stories. In fact, I remember the name of the first story I ever wrote. It was called The Kraken Ice Creek Mystery.
You are jumping ahead in the questions.
Oh, sorry.
He did not see the questions beforehand, I promise.
I never follow the rules.
No, that's good. There are no rules except this one. So, what's the worst thing you've ever spilled while writing?
The worst thing I ever spilled.
Sometimes it's just jogging memory.
You know what it probably was? It was probably a glass of Guinness.
Oh.
And to me, that's really a bad thing.
I understand that. That is a good answer. So, you kind of maybe predicted this, but who was your favorite character when you were 10?
When I was 10, yeah, it was the Hardy Boys, yeah. Oh, you know who else I was a fan of? And that was the heroes that Edgar Rice Burroughs wrote about. John Carter of Mars, Tarzan of the Apes.
So now who's your favorite character? Now who's your favorite character?
Now my favorite character, think about that. I don't think it's Gatsby, but it might be Gatsby. It might be. I just am such a fan of F. Scott Fitzgerald.
So now we're going to look for your Hardy Boys F. Scott Fitzgerald mashup. So what's the best piece of writing advice you've ever gotten?
Well, the best piece of writing advice I ever got was when I was a reporter, and you try to figure out what what sound bites should I use? You know, you do an interview, and people are telling you all this stuff, and it's all good, but somehow you have to make sense out of it, and you have to, you know, draw it to a proper conclusion. And someone said to me, well, one of the assistant news directors said to me that what you have to do is you look at what they say as if it's simply part of the script. So you're writing their words into what you're saying, and then the whole thing flows and makes sense. You can't include everything, but that can help you get to the, you know, to the meat of it, to the very interesting parts.
What's the worst piece of writing advice you've ever gotten?
Let's see. Well, when I was younger, I was often told that there was too much description, and maybe that was true in retrospect, but I never appreciated that because I always spent time trying to describe things exactly right.
I would ask that person, how do you world build without description? But, you know, we all heard the advice. So what's one word you'll never put in print? That's the James Lipton inspired one.
The one word, I'll tell you the one word I tried to put in print that the publisher of the original publisher of the book wouldn't let me use.
Good enough.
All right, so if you're all prepared for this word, because it's a pretty bad word. Ass. Seriously, they wouldn't let me use it. I had to use backside.
And that is why we asked the question. What pen names have you toyed with?
Let's see. Oh, I have. Let me think. See if I can. You know, when you get older, so these things slip away. Let me think, though. One thing that I used to use when I was in college was just simply J. Nathan. And I actually had a stamp made. This is really going to sound stupid. I had a stamp made that said, "The Bohemian Garret of J. Nathan."
Again, this is why we asked the question. So, I feel like you just got the next question already, but where's your favorite place to write other than the Bohemian Garret?
That's kind of it. But other than that, you know, it doesn't matter where I am. I can actually write anywhere and always carry those little notebooks. The moleskins are my favorite, and I'm always right.
So the Garret's here.
The Garret, yeah, I guess it is. I carry it around with me.
So where's the weirdest place you've ever written?
Let's see. Let me think about that. The weirdest place. Well, let's see. There certainly have been romantic places, cabins in the woods, that type of thing. But the weirdest place, I don't know. What's the weirdest spot? Probably when I was in college and I worked at Montgomery Ward in the toy department. And it was such a boring toy department that I would actually scribble away sitting there.
Mental picture now. Description, good job. So who's the first person to see your drafts after yourself, of course?
Well, I always show my wife.
Okay.
Good answer.
I always see. I really respect her opinion, so.
Who's the last person you've ever let see your drafts?
The last person is probably my brother.
I think that's the answer. So do you have a lost piece of writing you still think about?
When you say lost, you mean?
Interpret away.
Okay, well, I did write a book once that I completed, and it was before it had become really popular for these people to pretend that they were honest-to-goodness agents, and that they really had your best interest. Well, maybe agents never felt that way, I don't know. But now it's such a scam. I mean, every time you turn around, someone's sending you an email that they're going to do great things for your book.
Inviting you to Sacramento to do a reading.
But the Lost Beast was a thing. It was actually a young adult story, which I know you dabble in. So there you are. But anyway, it was based on the fact that Robert Louis Stevenson, when he before he came up with the idea for Treasure Island, he had spent time living in Monterey, and he spent a lot of time out on Point Lobos. And if you take a look at a map that he drew of the fictional Treasure Island and compare it with Point Lobos, you'll be interested to see how similar the two are. And so I wrote this story based on the idea that he, for kids, that he had looked there for buried treasure. Well, actually, that part is supposedly true, because there was a bandit of the time who supposedly had buried treasure there that he had searched for. But anyway, in the story, the kids run across all these clues and secret codes and all this stuff and pirates and things, and they eventually find this chest, which they think is going to contain all this wealth, all these riches. But what it actually contains is, and I don't mind telling you the ending because this book was never published, and that's why it's a lost book. But anyway, but it turns out to be writings of his that were never published.
That would be treasure, honestly. So what's the best idea you've never used?
You must have stayed up late. Let me see, the best idea I've never used. I think I've used all my ideas.
All right, that's an answer. And some writers are just going to pretend I didn't ask that question, because why are they going to give it away? So what's the worst idea you have used?
Well, let me think about that. Let's see. Maybe it's this thing I was telling you about Robert Louis Stevenson.
I do have them in order to help warm up. So, who's the most overhyped writer of all time?
Oh, that's a good question. The most overhyped writer.
People have answers, I can hear.
I know. I'm trying to think. Somebody who everybody loves, I just detest, and there are so many that are like that.
So just the first one that came to your head, just the most overhyped. Most, remember, we're at most.
We're at most. Oh, gosh. I don't know, I can't, and it's not Hemingway or one of those guys. I like that stuff. So,
Is it Robert Louis Stevenson?
and no, it's not Robert Louis Stevenson, and it's not Charles Dickens either, because he was a great writer, and I know he wrote so many words because he got paid by the word, but still, it's still good stuff. But no, I'm sorry, I'm blanking.
Well, the next follow-up is, who's the most underappreciated?
Most underappreciated. You know, I'll tell you, this is an odd answer to this question, but because I think he still writes, but not the same type of material. Winston Graham, you know, did the Poldark series and all. But you know, before he had that persona, he wrote mysteries and things. And unless I've got him confused, you know, and it's actually two different people. Winston Graham. Yeah, no, I don't think so. But I wish he would write another mystery. I like those stories. I like them a lot more than baldark type of story.
That's an interesting answer, actually. So, invited all expenses paid to read your work, where would you be thrilled to go?
I'm sorry, say again?
Invited all expenses paid to read your work, where would you be thrilled to go?
All expenses paid?
All expenses paid. All expenses. Any ones you can even imagine having while you're there paid.
Wow, anywhere. Anybody who'd pay all my expenses.
There you go.
So, what if you had to pay your own way?
I had to pay my own way. This is about as far as I go.
Okay, so that's the 20, so we're in the bonus round now. Who, not in this room, would you like to thank or otherwise acknowledge?
Not in this room.
Not in this room. Don't worry, the follow-up is in this room, so you're going to be covered.
Who's not in this room? Well, let me think. See, right now her name has slipped my mind. The woman who gives the tours at, or used to, I don't really know if she's even still living, but she's the one who gave me the idea to write the book, Stop It, You're Scared.
Oh, yeah.
And she had, you see, Ms. Laura Knight, who built Viking's Home, if you're familiar with Viking's Home, which is where that story of mine takes place on Emerald Bay in Lake Tahoe. And Laura Knight in the 20s bought 240 acres of land there at Lake Tahoe for $250,000. And she had this, she loved Scandinavian architecture, and she had Viking's Home built. And the woman who gave the tours, started the tours really after the place became a state park, she spent summers there as a child. And so she was very open with telling me about her experiences there and all that. And that's what actually led to my writing the book. So she's the one I would like to thank, who's not in this room, but you see now I can't even think of her name.
She's not in the room though, so it's
So
fine.
she won't know. Please don't tell her that. Anytime you see her, or ever go to Viking's Home for a tour.
Okay, so in the last question, is there anybody in the room you'd like to thank or otherwise acknowledge?
Well, of course, because there's my wife is sitting in the
I
back.
told you were covered. That's it. Those are the 20 questions in the bonus round. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you to our wonderful volunteers who are the ones scurrying around making sure this is all set up and that everybody has a place to sit and something to eat. Our submissions are also open. So if you are either a writer or a performer, please visit our website. We have forms that you can fill out to tell us a little bit more about yourselves, but we are looking for work. We are looking for performers. We are working on our 2024 season.
Or a volunteer.
Or volunteers, yes. If you want to come and donate your time and hang out and help us set things up and always get first dibs on the cookies, that is a great way to do it. So you can do all of that through our website, which is just storiesonstagesacramento.org. And otherwise, this is our final event of the season. So thank you all for being here, but we'll be back for 2024. We're building it right now, so we look forward to seeing you next year. Thank you.